Hi everyone, it's Ravi, aka the Junior Explorer. I'm here with a first-time guest to the channel, Killian Charles of Brunswick Exploration. Now, before I introduce Killian and discuss the endless number of lithium projects over at BRW, I wanted to provide the viewers some insight on how the company got on my radar and why it's my number one lithium junior. So, how did I find Brunswick? Well, it's quite simple. John Kaiser. I've been a subscriber for many years of the Kaiser Research Online, and I was notified of this early stage company that was assembling Canada's largest lithium grassroots program. Now, John's not the only reason why I decided to take the plunge. After missing out on one of Bob Ware's companies a couple years back, I made it a point in my 10 commandments of investment to jump on board the next Bob Ware's venture. So it took me a while to be sold on the EV revolution. And as Brunswick continued to add to the portfolio and really kind of lay out their strategy, became very clear that I needed to push the chips more in. So fast forward a year or so, and here we are today. So with that, I'd like to welcome Killian Charles. Killian, my apologies for keeping you waiting. I hope you did not mind me spending a couple of minutes on me becoming a Brunswick shareholder. So welcome.
Always happy to be talking to a Brunswick shareholder anyway, and they can take all the time in the world. Don't worry about it. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know you have a pretty busy schedule. There's lots of stuff going on. You guys just announced that boots are going to be back on the ground at Mirage pretty soon. So I think the viewers are going to be in for a little bit of a treat, especially with the updates and getting into a little bit more detail of some of the projects in the different regions there. So before we get into all of the exciting projects, I was hoping you can give my audience a brief overview of the team. Now, obviously, you know, yourself and Bob are probably the most involved in kind of the day-to-day and decisions, but you know, I know Bob's kind of the chairman and visionary behind Brunswick, but can you kind of talk to just briefly his involvement in kind of the day-to-day or kind of your guys' interaction?
Yeah, no, look, Brunswick Exploration was always a fun idea where we felt that there wasn't enough grassroots exploration, especially within the quote unquote larger OSISCO group. Not to say that they don't do exploration, but on the early stage, it was always a little bit lacking. And we always had a bunch of wild and crazy ideas across a variety of commodities. And so we started Brunswick Exploration with that very broad mandate, but quite rapidly realized that there was a unique, almost once in a career opportunity on the lithium side. And I really want to underpin the fact that what we're seeing happening in the lithium space, there's no good analogy for it. You almost have to go back to the original uranium boom, and by that I mean of the 1940s and 50s.
Wow.
Find something comparable. Never. It's been a few decades where we've sort of pushed for a new commodity that hasn't been really explored before. You know, I've said this a few times in the past, but copper and gold, we've been exploring it since the Bronze Age.
Mhm.
And here, when we think about lithium, its real exploration push, it's at most, you know, a dozen years if I want to go out into Australia. In Canada, it's practically non-existent. You know, most people would walk over lithium-bearing pegmatites and won't even think about it for a second. And so that's a really unique opportunity. And you know, hats off to Bob and the team and everyone here to recognize that this is where we can be value added. We can bring, you know, our exploration chops to the table. We can be very serious and very aggressive in terms of how we explore. That's another key thing here. When you look at the team we've assembled, you know, whether it's having Francois or Charlie for, you know, the rest of Canada, we quickly recognize that it's not just a particular project, it's not just a particular area, it's the entirety of Canada that is virgin for lithium exploration. And so we quickly assembled a team, we quickly assembled a multitude of projects, and recognizes that we needed some strong, uh, well formed people to handle some of these projects, and that's where Francois and Charlie came in. You know, Francois he ran a Quebec junior in the James Bay, so it's an area that he's intimately aware, and so he's doing a great job of leading the charge there. We're going to have lots of results around Mirage over the coming weeks and months here. So he'll be a key asset to shepherd that project to where it needs to go. And likewise, Charlie, having a lot of experience across Ontario, flying to Canada, he was a key person to bring on board to help us identify targets as well as grow the company and ensure that we're, best practice at all times in terms of exploration here. So, it's really very much of an exploration focus, which is what Brunswick is all about. It's all about making new discoveries. And we strongly believe we have the team to execute on that front.
Awesome. And can you tell us a little bit of your background and how you got into the mining space?
Yeah, so, studied geology at McGill, went ahead and became a mining analyst for a number of boutique firms here in Montreal. Spent a lot of time on that front. From there, I joined Integra Gold, which was actually the first company I covered as a mining analyst. Loved the asset so much, I convinced the CEOs, like, look, you guys are all in Vancouver. You need somebody here in Quebec. Let me help out on that front. So I joined them for about 18 months before we sold the company to Eldorado. At that point in time, Bob was saying, well, we're starting a new base metal vehicle inside Osisko. Why don't you come and join and do that one for a while? So I hopped on, timing was right, hopped on with the Osisko guys to help them out on Osisko metals. And about 2 years ago, as I had mentioned, myself and Bob had the idea of like, let's do something on the junior side. Let's do something on the exploration side. And that was sort of the impetus to form Brunswick Exploration and get her going.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to do a quick little flyover of the Canada projects and why they kind of differ and why Brunswick differs from a lot of the other lithium juniors. So, first of all, Brunswick's portfolio is quite diverse. While most juniors are kind of in a single province or hold one or two small projects, Brunswick has multiple projects in multiple provinces. In fact, Brunswick is one of only two companies that I know of personally that have projects in 3 or more provinces. Brunswick's undertaken Canada's largest grassroots lithium initiative with the largest Canada-wide portfolio, projects in 7 provinces with over 800 pegmatites. And, from what I understand, Killian, correct me if I'm wrong, this ends up being a numbers game when it comes to identifying these LCT pegmatites. So that's, one thing I wanted to share. And then a key fundamental of evaluating projects is being near infrastructure. And if you look at kind of the mandates for the projects and assessing projects for Brunswick, needs to be near infrastructure. And they're not looking for tiny deposits. If you kind of read the press releases, minimum 500 meters for these pegmatites. Unlike Brunswick, they're not afraid to kind of mention the size of pegmatites or kind of what their strategy is. So that's kind of just a brief overview of just Brunswick and their projects and kind of the things that's important to them and how they decide, what needs to be added to their portfolio. So they're searching for whales. They're not looking for the small stuff. They're looking for the next green bushes and the PMETs and those type of discoveries.
Look, absolutely. When we think about lithium exploration, again, just not happening in Canada, that's where we saw that everyone started from the same position. And I really want to underline this. When I'm doing copper exploration, when I'm doing gold exploration, I'm fighting against, hundreds of millions of dollars that has been spent over, 12 decades of exploration in Canada as a whole. Same thing on the copper side. The big discoveries, it's not to say that they can't be made again, there can't be new big discoveries, but most of them have already been found, and it's really, really tough. And what we recognize on the lithium side is that everyone's starting from that same position of grassroots exploration because we hadn't done exploration, we had not explored for lithium. And so when we recognize that, hey, we started small, I'll be honest, we started largely in Atlantic Canada, largely in Quebec, and we said, well, it's the same rocks in Ontario, and it's the same rocks in Manitoba, and it's the same rocks in Saskatchewan, it's the same rocks further afield. Why shouldn't we be looking there? If we develop a strong strategy, if we develop key things that we want to be looking for, pegmatites, of course, near surface, near infrastructure, but if we developed our exploration strategy, then it's a rinse and repeat. And Why should it be multiple companies that do it? Why should it be a major that goes ahead and does all this exploration? Why can't it be a junior? Why can't it just be a singular company like Brunswick Exploration that has this mandate to go ahead and yeah, as you mentioned, look for whales across all of Canada? And so we really sort of broke the mold a little bit on this sense because a company like Brunswick Exploration doesn't really exist on the gold side. It doesn't really exist on the nickel or the copper side. It is unique to ourselves and it is unique to this particular industry. You have to understand that exploring for lithium is not like exploring for those other commodities. It's field check, but it's rapid field check. We've mentioned it in the past, and we started to, at first we were a little bit afraid of giving out, our sort of our secrets, even though, they're clearly well defined in, academic papers for dozens of years now. But what we're doing is we're looking for geochemical markers in these pegmatites. And the time it takes to identify those markers, well, it's minutes in the field. So that allows me to say, well, I'm not going to be afraid to take on 800 pegmatites. I'm not going to be afraid to take on such a large portfolio. And the gold side, I wouldn't be able to do this. It would take me decades to go through it all of this portfolio. It would take me tens of millions of dollars. That'd be too dilutive. Here, I have the advantage of it being on a case-by-case basis, be cheap and efficient. So yeah, we can make it into a numbers game. We can almost turn it on its head. Usually portfolio diversification in junior mining is you got to own 50 different stocks, right? In the hopes that one of them has the asset you want. And we rejected that. We said no to that. Let's put them all in a single company. Let's put it all in Brunswick Exploration. And it is absolutely unique to what we're doing. And I really want to say, just starting. We have much more to keep doing. We've acquired more. We're still acquiring more ground. I know I keep mentioning it, but it is important to recognize that we still believe in the continued potential of grassroots lithium exploration in Canada and further afield. There's a lot more work that needs to be done here, and there's going to be a lot more discoveries to be had over the next few years. And I want Brunswick to capture as many of those as possible.
So do I. Thank you for sharing that good insight there. So let's deal with the elephant in the room. I've heard a lot of chat on the different boards and whatnot. Hearst or Hearst is in the vehicle that transport the deceased to the resting place. April 24th, Brunswick started a drilling and stripping program at the Hearst project. There was approximately a 1,000-meter drill program to test the strike and extent and depth extension of the spodumene bearing decoy pegmatite, as well as the newly discovered mantis and firefly pegmatites. However, 3 months have passed. We really haven't heard much about Hearst or the Lowther program. Is this simply just a case of it being a little bit more difficult to kind of navigate the property to assess potential drill targets, or is it a situation where maybe people's expectations are a little too high too soon, and you just need a little bit more time to kind of scour the property and kind of look for additional drill targets?
Yeah, it's a little bit of A, a little bit of B, and a little bit of C, which I think people also need to understand is by having such a large portfolio, I have to be judicious in where I spend my capital and where I send my teams as well. So I have to make sure that when we're spending a dollar, it is the best possible dollar being spent on the best possible project. So there's a little bit of a whipsaw when it comes around to the project where, when it comes to, let's say, Quebec, we're focusing on Mirage because that's where we see the best opportunities. Granted, we're limited in terms of where we can access in the province, but even if it was, no fire restriction, we would still naturally focus on Mirage. That's where we see the best potential. In terms of Hearst, in terms of the rest of our portfolio, we initially went there because it was an easy access, and it's right on the side of the Trans-Canadian Highway. So we said, okay, well, let's get into it. Spent a little bit of time, but then we started cycling our teams out further out west. So it's just been a question of, look, we want to make sure that when we come to the market with news, we have something that is fulsome and we can present the full picture. We don't want half stories, if you will. And so for us, it's a question where, okay, we're working this other area. We're now coming back into Hearst. We're now working harder into Hearst to be able to present a full story of what's happening in the area. So
Okay.
it's just a question of, look, we have to make sure that we're always working in the best areas possible. And we hope to be releasing some news on Hearst as well as the rest of the portfolio in the coming weeks.
Perfect. And are there any geological insights on Hearst you can provide that talks to the scale and the potential of the project?
So look, Hearst is an area that, was first uncovered about 20 years ago on the decoy pegmatite. There hasn't been really any exploration work since then. There has hardly been any prospecting. But the whole area of Ontario, we have a number of other claims as well. Nipigon, where a number of other companies are also making discoveries where we have claims nearby, a number of pegmatites that have never been tested. So, for us, Hearst is all encompassing in Ontario. We have a number of projects in the area that we are working on actively over the next, say, 6 to 8 weeks right now.
Okay, awesome. And let's get into Atlantic Canada. Now, you have multiple projects in the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada region, such as the SMB in Nova Scotia, Catamaran in New Brunswick. And from a kind of a geological standpoint, we talk about the Canadian Shield and how that geology is somewhat, I'm guessing, again, I'm not a geologist or don't have a background, but I hear a lot about Australia and a lot of the similarities in those kind of rocks. Now, the Maritimes don't necessarily sit in the Canadian Shield. What geological context makes this part of Canada highly prospective for lithium?
Yeah, so when we looked at Atlantic Canada, our basis on that one was twofold. One, obviously, the ample amount of infrastructure, and what we're looking for is not so much deposits that are similar to Australia or to other deposits in the Shield. We're looking more like the Carolinas, so more deposits similar to Piedmont, to operations by Albemarle. So that's the type of deposits that we were and we are still targeting in the area. For us, it's a question of just, again, making sure we're focusing on the best area, focusing, again, we're looking for whales. We'll go back and look for these tier 2 assets further down the road. But as it stands right now, we have to, make sure that we're putting our best foot forward at all times.
Okay. And was the area affected by any forest fires? And what kind of ongoing work is being done in Atlantic Canada?
So not much ongoing work right now. It's very sporadic. Obviously, the advantage with Atlantic Canada is that we can work it very late in the season, sometimes all the way up to December, to be quite honest, and it opens up very early in the season. So for us, it's one of these assets where we go back to it, say, November into December, and likewise March, April, as we wait for the rest of Canada to open up. It's for us, it's just a question of sequencing the team more than anything else.
Okay. And let's talk Saskatchewan. So on January 17th, Brunswick Exploration stakes multiple highly prospective regional lithium projects in Saskatchewan. The Trans-Hudson Project, you have the Lake Athabasca Project, and then you added some more projects, the Hanson Lake Project. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind when someone mentions Saskatchewan is uranium. Lithium wasn't even top of mind until I learned that you added some projects back in January. What makes kind of the upper third of Saskatchewan, when we kind of talk Canadian Shield, exciting for lithium exploration?
Well, look, to be quite honest, to go back into it, you sort of said it right on. It's the Canadian Shield. So it is as prospective as anywhere else where the shield is situated. We have, metasedimentary belts. We have a number of S-type plutons. We have structures for these pegmatitic fluids to work their way up. Pretty much have everything that's required for, new spodumene, new lithium discoveries in the province. Historically, it saw none of that. Right? Everyone was so focused, to your point, on uranium and to a lesser extent on VMS deposits, so copper and zinc, or gold deposits, that they never even thought about looking at lithium there. And if I compare to the plethora of lithium discoveries in Manitoba or Ontario, well, it's the same rocks that continue into Saskatchewan. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking there. Now, it's been, as much as people like to talk about forest fires in Quebec, there has been forest fires in the areas as well. Some pretty gnarly ones, to be quite honest. So it's been smoky, to say the least, out there. The teams are progressing, maybe not at the pace we would originally want to, but they are making a lot of progress, and we hope to be releasing some more news on that front again in the coming weeks. You have to remember that this is the point in time where we wanted to work as much as possible. Obviously, the forest fires sort of threw a wrench in our plans, but for us, it was knuckle down and try to rip through as many of these targets. It's a numbers game. It really is a numbers game. It's kind of hard to pinpoint which one is going to be the best deposit, the one that we want to focus on. When we were at the start of the year, it had all of those opportunities, but now we're really starting to see, okay, we've done a first pass on a lot of these projects. This is one where we want to be working on. This is where we're going to focus on for 2024. And a lot of these projects are going to be dropped going forward as we focus on those whales. That's what it's about. I'm not going to hold on ground that's useless or has no potential. I'm going to focus on the whales, and some of these other projects are going to be vended or simply dropped if we know that there's no lithium potential there.
Okay. And when can we expect drilling on the Saskatchewan projects?
It's going to be result dependent. So right now, again, being smoked out in a lot of different areas, it's a little bit of a slower go. But again, these are projects that we can access year round. We can drill year round. So if the results are there, if we're seeing the opportunity, we will absolutely be drilling them once we can.
Okay. So let's move over to Manitoba. Back in January, Brunswick staked multiple highly prospective regional lithium projects, one of those being the Lynn Lake project. How are things progressing in Manitoba? Could we see some additional projects or claims as part of the expansion in that province and as field work kind of continues?
Yeah, absolutely. We probably will be adding to our portfolio. We still see good opportunities in the area. We had done a first pass a few weeks ago now. We're waiting for some results on that. So we're quite excited. Looking forward to getting those results in.
Okay. And let's move over to, I think, everyone's favorite. James Bay is definitely creating quite the buzz, and obviously most recently with that news release from Patriots. So now you recently announced that the team is back in James Bay, and specifically the Mirage project. Works commenced at the Mirage. However, it seems like for most of the juniors, field work is still on hold. What's the forest fire situation in James Bay, and how was Brunswick able to get a team back out of Mirage?
Yeah, so we're actually kind of lucky on that front. If you look at what essentially is closed in the province right now, it is most of the fires are now in the western half of James Bay, which is where the main road access are, exactly right there. So it's where the main road access are, the Billy Diamond Highway connecting to the Trans-Taiga. Both of those have been closed. The good news is that as the forest fires in southern Quebec have all been contained, it's allowed the government to focus its effort on these fires in the James Bay area. And the situation is slowly improving. So most of our projects are locked out because, again, what do? We focused on infrastructure. Well, go figure that the main infrastructure there is the Billy Diamond Highway and the Trans-Taiga. So obviously we're a little bit limited around for those ones. However, the eastern half of the James Bay is open. All right. It is wet. And funnily enough, I was talking to the teams on the field, and they actually got rained out a few times this week. It goes to show just how much rain is working its way through there and how it's more and more of a local situation. And so to access that camp, it's a fly camp.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to come in by float plane directly into that project. That's how, we had envisioned, initial access. It's a remote camp, but it's a camp that is independent from needing the Trans-Taiga or the Billy Diamond Highway. Now, obviously, we can supply ourselves from the Trans-Taiga or the Billy Diamond, but there's no point in doing so right now. And so that's why we were actually left in a very unique position where we could restart exploration and did restart exploration. Now, again, sometimes, fortune favors us from time to time. Because quite honestly, of all the projects that I wish we could work on, go figure that it's Mirage as well, right? That's a great project to be back on. The guys, the boulders that they found right off the bat, it is astounding. And again, it goes back to that original statement of being a numbers game. Our view was, okay, here are a number of strong bets, if you will, whether it's Hearst, whether it's, projects, Hanson Lake, we think that there's a good opportunity. Is it going to be the whale? We don't know. But we always viewed all of these projects as equal footing, so to speak. We didn't know at the start of the years where we were going to be pulled. At the start of the year, if you would have told me, Killian, do you believe Mirage is where you feel there's the best opportunity? I would said, like, maybe there's no way to know. And rapidly, that's where we're starting to see here is, the boulders that were identified, the size of them, the sheer richness of the mineralization in them. It's astounding to see metric scale, like the boulders the size of a small house, just absolutely filled with spodumene. I would have one of the geos laughing and saying, well, we're going to have to find a new name for a rock that's just, 100% spodumene here. Like, I can't even see any other minerals in some of these things. So it's quite exciting to see almost bonanza grades over not just a few centimeters here. No, over meters and meters, these big boulders. And, we have now spent almost 2 weeks in the field scouring the area for the source, and we're going to be having some new news by the end of this month here. So we, everyone keep their eyes peeled for anything that comes out of there, because I'm sure it's going to be extremely exciting. I always take a simple view. Monster elephants, these big deposits have monster elephant anomalies. And that's what we're seeing at Mirage. We're seeing a very large anomaly, very major anomaly in these boulders that you can see from satellite imagery. We see all of the ingredients in place for a, hopefully a world-class discovery.
Awesome. So I'm gonna zoom in on James Bay, and I'm calling this the Fab Five. So for you basketball fans, that's the reference there. So a lot of good-looking projects in the James Bay portfolio. However, again, it sounds like the near-term focus will be on Anatacau West, Main, Plex, Mythril, and Mirage. Now, before we go into each of these, there was a big news release from Patriot Battery Metals. They announced a maiden resource of 109 million tons at 1.42% on a CV5 pegmatite. Now, not getting you into any specifics around your neighbor's MRE. What, in your opinion, does a resource like this do to validate the James Bay as a world-class lithium district?
Given 5 years from now, people will learn about the James Bay in school books. That's the level that we have to think about here, right? This is an incredible environment for lithium discoveries. And quite honestly, when you think about all of the investments that's being made into lithium battery plants in Europe or in the US or in southern Canada, they're predominantly going to be sourced from Quebec. It is absolutely going to be known. Just we have the lithium triangle in South America. Well, we're going to have our own lithium triangle here with James Bay in Ontario. It is an absolutely incredible area to be doing exploration, and the potential is absolutely shocking. Canada will be a top 3 lithium producer. It just needs time.
That leads me into my my next question or kind of comment. I know we're kind of still in the infancy of exploration here in Canada, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I'm of the personal belief that based on Canada's geology and the fact that we've had very little lithium exploration, that Canada's poised to be a powerhouse in hard rock lithium production and may one day surpass Australia. From a credibility standpoint, what does this do for Canada on the global scene?
I want to point out that I don't even, you mentioned a hard rock there. I think Canada is going to be a major lithium. You know, we don't even need to say hard rock. It is going to be a major lithium producer on a global scale. It will definitely redraw some political maps, if you will. When you look at all of the investments happening on that lithium side, on the downstream, when it comes to battery manufacturers, the reason why they set themselves up here is because they see the potential in Canada. And Canada absolutely will be a powerhouse. And resources like CV5, like the one done by Patriot, start to paint the picture here. This is ground floor. A lot of people don't recognize that, you know, to be owning solid lithium stocks in Canada that have good exploration strategy or good deposits is one of the best long-term mining investments they can do. There's no way around it that these assets will be built, they will be developed, they will most likely be acquired. There is so much value creation to be made. That's the thing that a lot of people forget. You know, there's a reason why the Australians, a lot of Australian companies came to look in Quebec, because from 2010 to 2020, it's $25 billion of value creation that was done in the lithium space in Australia. We haven't had that experience in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Most TSX investors struggle to see this potential, to see just how much of a boom is coming. We're so conditioned on copper and gold that we barely understand how geopolitical lines are being redrawn for lithium, and how Canada, but specifically Quebec, and more specifically the James Bay, is at the center of it all. So
Mm-hmm.
for me to have, you know, a shared claim boundaries with pegmatites right next to some of these boys over here at Patriot, hell, my market cap could just be on that single basis, irrespective of everything else I have in the portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
It is incredible to be at this point, and it goes right back to what I said at the start. I've never seen that in my never seen something like this in my career. Neither has Bob, neither has anyone in this team. And you know, I invite any investors to point to a similar long-term sustained boom in a singular commodity. Right? They say, "Oh, well, you know, iron ore 10 years ago." The difference is that iron ore kind of came and went. It was already sort of known, and it's largely an infrastructure play more than anything else. This is completely different. This is a new commodity that we haven't done the proper work for, and that the entire global economy is pivoting towards. Decarbonization is a massive trend, and lithium is right at the center of it all.
I think it is a pretty fair statement that the Australians get it. I think the Canadians still just don't have a clue as of right now, but hopefully things will turn around. Are we getting close to a rising tide lifts all boats, or are we a few discoveries away before Lithium Mania 2.0 kicks in?
Oh, you know what? I think lithium. It's funny because you mentioned Lithium Mania from John. You know, Lithium Mania hasn't even started in my mind. All of the momentum we've seen is nothing. You have to remember, if Patriot gets acquired, and I fully believe it will be acquired, that money will recycle itself into new and other juniors in the area. It will absolutely lift all tides, and I think it will show and demonstrate the importance of lithium in Quebec. And so when you look at Albemarle making $100 million investment at a premium to the stock price on a non-binding term, it's a memorandum of it's an MOU I think that just goes to show that the real players know that this is the area that they want to be in, that they want to have exposure to. You know, this is the best place in the world to be exploring for lithium, hands down.
So let's move over to Plex. So speaking of the Lagrange shear zone, Brunswick has the Plex project, which is just east of PMET's Corvette project. You know, not being a non-geo, this would imply there's probably a potential to host similar mineralization to the neighboring Corvette and Canset deposits. What can you tell us about the Plex project as you know of it today? And are there any similarities from a geological perspective to those that also sit on the shear zone?
So absolutely, we have similarities. We have over 200 pegmatites showings. Now, they're not going to be hitting the size, you know, that 500 meters, but we have over 200 pegmatite showings on the Plex property package. None of them have been explored for lithium. And obviously, we're just there twisting our thumbs, being like, when can we go back out there, right? Due to the fire restrictions. It is an absolutely world-class area to be looking into. As you mentioned, there's a number of discoveries, namely Corvette number 5, along the Lagrange shear zone. So this is the perfect geological environment to make new discoveries. And we control almost 70 kilometers of strike length that has seen no lithium exploration. Well, we want to go fix that. Not to say that we're going to have the same types of deposit. We always wish we have the same type of deposits, but all the ingredients are there, right? That's why we absolutely want to go looking and absolutely want to see the potential of this area.
Okay, so let's move over to Mythril. This project sits right on the border of Patriots project. Although it does not appear to sit on the Lagrange shear zone, it does seem to run on the Lac Gear greenstone belt. Can you talk or advise how these are related or interconnected?
Yeah, so look, you know, when we staked Mythril, our main view was that we had identified a number of pegmatites on the southern boundary of Mythril and Patriots claims. And so what we saw there was pegmatites that, again, it comes up so often, that had seen no work. Yes, they were slightly outside of the preferred geological environment, but that doesn't really matter to a certain extent, in the sense of once you have an area that is fertile, all the pegmatites in that area are going to be of interest. Now, the shear zone, you have to understand that it just provides a preferred pathway for these mineralized fluids to take. The key term here is preferred. Doesn't mean that it can't take another path. It just, you know, this is the one that they're going to favor. And so that's the reason why we staked, I should say we optioned the Mythril property, is that we saw a lot of opportunities there. We saw some important anomalies that had not been followed up on. And, you know, we saw, well, look, let's see what happens. It just takes a chopper, a couple of days, and we'll know. Do we have a lithium-bearing pegmatite right next to the largest pegmatite, spodumene-bearing pegmatite in North America? Let's go ahead and find out.
Okay. And with this project sitting on the border of Patriot, would the focus be on the areas just north of those discovery holes as kind of a starting point?
Absolutely. No, that's the entire reason why we staked it. You know, everything else to us was of lower interest. We had identified, as I mentioned, pegmatites along the property boundary. That is the reason why we optioned that property.
Okay.
We are going to be focusing almost exclusively on that area for the Mythril project.
Awesome. So let's talk Anatacau West. May 24th, you intercepted 26.5 meters grading at 1.51 on the initial drill program. And then on July 20th, you had some additional holes that were released, intercepting 25.1 meters grading at 1%. And in my opinion, some really good results there. Now, it sounds like you believe that you've intercepted at least 2 continuous distinct spodumene-bearing pegmatites that are kind of going in this north to northeast direction. Now, prospecting, it sounds like, was halted due to the forest fires. what's the plan to get back on Anatacau West? And is it plausible that these pegmatites are running east to west, that you'll have a team prospect kind of in that southern easterly direction from your drill holes?
So these pegmatites are a continuation from pegmatites on the Alchem's ground, where they run more of a southwest to northeast strike. And so our view was, look, they have spodumene 100 meters from the property boundary. Why wouldn't we have spodumene bearing pegmatites on the other side? So that's what we had initially gone ahead and done. Quite rapidly, we identified a number, as you mentioned, up to 2 at this point in time. Spodumene bearing pegmatites, they're open at depth. We only drilled them to about 100 meters down, 130 meters down. There's still a lot of upside there. And there's a lot of upside to have these pegmatites sort of repeat itself. Because you have to remember, from Alchem's deposit, that 40 million tons is contained in a number of, it's not a singular pegmatite like at CV5. It's a number of smaller ones.
I think it's about eight pegmatites, I think.
Exactly. And so this is the same continuation of those 8 pegmatites, on echelon pegmatites, that eventually, if you go number 9, number 10, number 11, number 12, and so on and so forth, well, eventually it crosses over onto our property. So there's that opportunity for repeatability further out to the east. And that's something that we're going to be hopefully prospecting, hopefully working once the fire restrictions open up in the coming weeks here. So obviously we have a camp at Anatacau Main. We want to come back here. We want to do more work. I'm sure we'll talk about it shortly, but we have made that new discovery at Anatacau Main again in a short amount of time. You have to remember that's what's so exciting is, we're in the field for what, a week and a half, and already we're making discoveries.
So yeah, well, let's go straight to Anatacau Main. That was pretty exciting news release on July 13th, where you found new large spodumene bearing pegmatites. So if I just kind of run down through some of the highlights there. So discovery of a pegmatite outcrop measuring at least 100 meters by 15 meters. Outcrop is within a larger cluster of pegmatite dikes, which all of them contain high-grade lithium mineralization. The mineralization varies between 5% to 50% spodumene throughout the pegmatite. The crystals, light gray in color and up to 20 centimeters long. So that's a good indication there. And it sounds like you feel pretty confident that that you guys actually submitted for some drill permits to potentially drill in the fall. Now, question is, it was mentioned in the news release that this discovery sits along a deformation corridor. As well, it states that the pegmatites the dikes run parallel and are structurally controlled with gentle folding and stacking. Can you explain to the viewers what that all means? And is it fair to say that this kind of differs from what you're seeing on Anatacau West in the same corridor?
Yeah, so I'm going to simplify here a little bit, but when we look at Anatacau West, when we look at Alchem's deposit, they run perpendicular to this shear zone. So what it really means is that they're contained and constrained to the shear zone. So strike extension to them is going to be limited. Once I punch through the shear zone, they kind of peter off, and that's the end of them. In the case of the NAS showing, what we can see is that the pegmatites themselves are, as you mentioned, running parallel. And so that means that the strike potential is substantially higher. As well, folding implies that we can start to build volume. We can start to build a lot more tons, right? Because it ends up stacking on itself. So this combination of having, strike extensions to it, or strike link to it, as well as, folding or, stacking of pegmatites, is extremely exciting, because it really does imply that there is potential for more tons, bigger deposits, bigger pegmatites than what we've seen, quite frankly, up until now across either Alchem or our ground.
Okay, so let's move over to what I believe is going to be Brunswick's flagship project. January 24th, you added the Mirage project to the Quebec portfolio. And on June 14th, Brunswick identifies major spodumene-bearing pegmatite boulder field. Now, a couple of the highlights, in less than 6 months of adding this project to the portfolio, and literally within hours of having boots on the ground, Brunswick was able to discover a field of more than 20 boulders with visible spodumene identified over a 1.7 kilometer strike length. Can you talk about how the team stumbled upon this, and if they're able to find 20 boulders in such a short time frame? Imagine what they can do with a week or even a month on the property. This must boost your confidence in finding the source.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's again, large deposits have large anomalies. It's not hard, or it shouldn't be hard when it comes to real large scale assets. It's kind of, funnily enough, it's kind of hard to hide them in nature. Mother Nature can really try, but it's a little bit tough to hide them. And this is exactly what we're seeing here, right? When you look at the size of these boulders, when you look at the mineralization contained within these boulders, you know you have something special. And you're right. In a few hours, they've already had found almost 2 kilometers of strike length of boulders. What happens after 2 weeks? Well, we've been there for 2 weeks. So we're extremely excited to be releasing more results and follow up from the work that we've done in the coming weeks here. This is going to be a core asset for us. We're already applied for drilling permits. We're securing our drill rigs. We are getting ready here for a major program in the fall.
Awesome.
It is going to be a very exciting time for Brunswick, and Mirage is going to be on everyone's lips. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the boulder field and kind of the discovery. So spodumene crystals, just from a description standpoint, large and up to 50 centimeters of white to pale gray in color. Visual observation of mineralization varying between 5 to 50% of the pegmatite. What's the significance of the color, size, and percentage of lithium as it pertains to the quality of the rock and the potential processing of the material? Does this crystal draw any comparisons to any other projects in the James Bay region?
So from a crystal size and crystal color, you're gonna have to bear with me here, but it actually draws a lot of comparison to CV5. You're dealing with very, very, it's not to say we have the same type of deposit, the same size, but when you're dealing with large crystals, pale crystals, that's exactly what people that know want to read. Color, it can be an indication of impurity in the spodumene crystal, which obviously has implications for, processing downstream, refining downstream. Here, by saying it's white, you're dealing with a very, very, very clean concentrate. On top of that, saying that you're dealing with very coarse mineralization, 50 centimeters, tells you that you don't even have to potentially even do something like flotation. It's just straight mechanical separation through DMS, dense media separation. So you're relying on density to remove your waste. The recoveries are lower, you're more in the 70% range, but it's like gravity on the gold side. Your processing costs are almost non-existent. You don't have to build a crazy mill. You don't have to handle chemical products. All of that goes on the waste side. So it's everything that you want to hear about from a metallurgical perspective. Like already, yes, we'll send assays for metallurgical work. Yes, we'll do everything that needs to be done, but there's going to be no major surprise here because we can already tell based on the color and crystal size. So that's fantastic. Now, in terms of the sheer, richness of the mineralization, what gets us really excited here is we're dealing with almost bonanza grade, right? We're dealing with areas where, when you think about it, when you're looking at a block that's, as you can see, the gentleman here being next to a, almost 5 meter tall block, when he's next to something like that and it is filled with 50% spodumene,
Okay.
well, that means that you're dealing with a very rich zone of spodumene, right? That has to come from something that's going to be of decent size. Remember that again at Corvette, they had, I believe it's called the Nova Zone,
Mm-hmm.
where, they get absolutely bonanza grade, things that are more like 5% lithium oxide over, 5, 10, 20, 30, well, maybe not 30 meters, but 20 meters. And, when we look at something like this is bonanza grade as well. And considering the size of the block, well, it's got to be at least 5 meters wide. So that is an astounding discovery to have. And it is extremely exciting for us to be so rapidly identifying these boulders and to have them be just so rich with spodumene. No, this is going to be a very, very exciting fall for Brunswick on the basis of Mirage,
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of any other discovery we make in the portfolio. That's just gravy on top.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And it was mentioned in the news release that the boulders are sub-angular to sub-rounded. Can you talk about the size and location of these boulders and how it bodes well for the sources system being on the Brunswick property?
Yeah. So again, when you're dealing with, sub-angular to sub-rounded, that's you'll ask 4 different geos, you'll get 4 different answers as to whether one wants to say sub-angular or sub-rounded. What you're dealing with here, and if you go back to the previous 2 images, you'll see that it's the one before and the one before that one. There you go. So you can see there sharp angles. That's exactly the type of boulders that do not travel far. So we're not dealing with a source that is 10 kilometers away.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with something that is quite proximal. On top of that, when you're finding this boulder train, what really is important is, okay, well, this boulder train, is it parallel to glaciation or perpendicular? And bear with me here for a second. But when it is perpendicular to glaciation, that means you're dealing with a source that has to be quite large in of itself. It cannot just be a point source that makes a fan that would be parallel. You're dealing with a multitude of point sources here, a multitude of potential sources that can't come from very far because you're dealing with angular boulders. So I'm very, very excited to share more news on this project as we gear up for drilling in late Q3, early Q4, which, to be quite honest, is only a month and a half away, right? Coming up real fast here. And I'm quite confident that with the work that we're doing right now, with the boots on the ground right now, we will find the sources, and that will drive forward with a lot of our future planned work here.
Okay. And you recently released, I guess, this past week, getting back and restarting the exploration at Mirage. So the team is back out there. You've lost a good month and a half of prospecting time. Does this approach how you take on the field work at Mirage?
So not hugely. Our plan was always to get drilling in early September anyway. So as it relates to Mirage, there's no major changes per se. We always had to wait, for permits to come in.
Mm-hmm.
We always had to secure our drill rig, which all of those things we've handled now. So from our perspective, there's no major change with the forest fires. Might have had a press release a little bit earlier, mid-July, instead of probably having a press release on Mirage in mid-August type of situation. But beyond that, there's hasn't been really of a shift in how we operate here. It is still steady as she goes, and driving into the fall. And again, what I keep saying all the time is what is going to be a very exciting fall.
Mm-hmm. And what's the confidence level of being able to see drill permits after about 45 days? Has the government been pretty good with issuing?
Oh, absolutely. We should be getting our drill permits well before the end of this month.
Okay.
We should be getting our drill permits within the next 2 weeks here.
Okay, that put us in around that second or third week of August. And you mentioned earlier about being able to get onto the Mirage using float planes. From a logistical standpoint, would there be any hurdles in getting drills onto the site?
No, No major hurdles. The project is easy to access. It's just for us, it was easier to do so from a float plane to avoid the forest fires, again, due to the current road closure and restrictions around the Billy Diamond and the Trans Taiga, which is how we normally would have access there, or from the road that leads up to the diamond mine, the Renard Diamond Mine. Now, again, there'd be no change of plans in terms of how we approach drilling. We still have a few more weeks before we do start drilling anyway. It's not going to be till September 1st. So at that point in time, we'll see what the situation is in terms of the forest fires. Hopefully it's all resolved. But by and large, there's been no real major change from how we approach this from a logistics perspective.
Okay. Now let's talk the summer fieldwork program and potential fall winter drilling. So fieldwork is pretty crucial for future drilling. Can you explain why it's critical to get this done now versus trying to do field work and prospecting any other time of the year, such as fall and winter?
Snow. That's all it is, right? We need to be able to see the rock. It's not anything particularly complicated on that front, but it boils down to snow. Obviously, it's something we have to deal with in Canada. So for us, there's some things we would have liked to have drilled earlier or worked differently, but we have to knuckle down as much as possible and focus on prospecting as much as possible. I'm sure there might be some investors who'd rather us to, we start drilling right away. But considering the size of our portfolio, we can pretty much drill year round. There's no real, impetus on that point. We cannot prospect year round. So it's really important that we focus all our efforts, all the teams on prospecting. We're halfway through the summer right now, early August. We still have a solid 2 months more worth of work until mid-October. And that is going to be the focus. Now, obviously, that's not to say that we're not drilling at any point. As I mentioned, we're going to be drilling in Hearst. But beyond that, sorry, not in Hearst, I mean in Mirage. Beyond that, we absolutely want to keep boots on the ground, prospecting as long as possible, so that as we move into the fall, as we move into the winter, we're drilling as many of these targets as possible.
Okay, so you kind of answered my next question. I was under the assumption, and this is just more of a general kind of assumption across all the different lithium juniors, that most prospecting will probably be wrapped up in that kind of August, but it sounds like you can go as far as October. What's the next steps after the prospecting and field work? How will you use the data collected to assess the projects and prioritize drilling for the fall winter campaign?
Look, at that point in time, anything that we believe has an anomaly that is worthy of follow-up, we'll see drilling. It is that simple. Obviously, if I drill 100 meters at Mirage, then I might reevaluate some of that priority. But that is a good problem to have. As we like to joke around the office, that is a Hollywood problem to have. Not to say that we're not going to go drill the rest of our targets. But look, that's the point, right? The objective of Brunswick is to find an elephant. And wherever that elephant is, that's where we're going to start to knuckle down on.
Okay. So before I wrap up, was there any other upcoming events or talking points you wanted to share with the audience?
When it comes to Brunswick, we touched upon it at the start, right? Where you'll struggle to find something similar to Brunswick Exploration and other commodities. I think this is a almost once in a lifetime opportunity when it comes to lithium exploration, specifically in Canada. I think this is a once in a lifetime opportunity when it comes to the portfolio of a junior being so large and so prospective across Canada. And, we have the team and the capital to execute what we want to do. So we really check all of the boxes that, we want to have, that I would have wanted to have when I was a mining analyst, in terms of being like, this is something that is going to be special. And I really believe that we have something absolutely special in Brunswick. No matter how biased I might be, I do think that we have something special.
And so do I. So in closing, here's why Brunswick's my top lithium pick. Number one, regardless of company, industry, it's all about management. Bob's a mining legend. You know, in my opinion, Killian's crushing it with the project acquisitions, moving things along, enhancing the portfolio in such a short time, and then obviously keeping, you know, us investors kind of up to speed. And there definitely sounds like there's a solid team behind them. So number two projects, you know, they have a robust and diverse portfolio of projects in a tier one jurisdiction. I think that's pretty key. I don't think people really, you know, keep that in mind, the jurisdiction that these projects are in. Massive group of projects in the hottest lithium district right now, James Bay. Highly prospective projects in other provinces. And again, largest grassroots portfolio in Canada. And then they're cashed up. They got money in the bank. There's no need to raise money this year. You know, they have money to drill, even acquire additional projects. And they have real projects with real results. So unlike some other lithium juniors that are just sitting on moose pasture and marketing themselves as the next Patriot, Brunswick is delivering constant news flow and results. Solid fundamentals, in my opinion, with a specific criteria for their projects. I think they're the gold standard for grassroots lithium exploration in Canada, and I would not be surprised if whatever the formula is at the end of this, it could be applied to other parts of the world. And I don't see Brunswick as being the next PMET 2.0. I think they're the Brunswick 1.0. What they're doing is quite unique. The portfolio, how they're approaching the projects, you know, I can go on and on. I'm confident that if there was one junior that will find the next Greenbushes or Corvette, it'll be Brunswick. So that's my, you know, high level elevator pitch there. Killian, I want to thank you for taking the time to update my followers on Brunswick's projects. I look forward to upcoming company updates. Lots been accomplished in such a short time. I honestly believe, and you mentioned this, we're just getting started, and I hope we can do this again.
Hey, look, pleasure to be here, and here's to an exciting fall. Let's put it that way.
Awesome. This is the Junior Explorer signing off, and have a great rest of the day.